In this tutorial, I'm going to talk a little bit about properties. A property is really just an attribute of an object. We have several objects at our disposal. As you can see here in our toolbox, these are all different controls, and those controls have attributes or properties. I'm going to go ahead and drag a button onto the web form, and I'm going to save that. And you can see that it actually creates a button. That's our design view. You can see in our source view or code view, you can see that it already has some properties, one being the ID property assigned to it. Now we could actually change the properties right here or add properties to it, but what I want to do is I want to come over to the actual properties window, and we'll manipulate them here in the properties window. When I'm designing my web form, I want to kind of get a look and feel, and I'm not going to get fancy with this thing on this tutorial. It's not going to be a very nice looking program, but it's just to demonstrate what the properties do. So I'm going to change this to button OK. That is the ID property, and that's just the name that we're going to use. It has to be unique. On this form, it has to be a unique name. You can come over here and you can see that the button still says button. Nothing's changed as far as the look goes. We've only changed the name or the ID of the button. When I highlight in the properties window, when I highlight these properties, down below it kind of gives me an idea of what that does. It gives you a brief description. The back color is the color of the background of the control. And if I click in here, I can change that to blue. I'll hit OK, and it actually does change the back color of my button to the color blue. It makes it a little hard to read, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to also change the fore color to a lighter color, and I'll go ahead and choose white for that. So you can see that I've defined two different properties, back color and fore color, with two different values. One of them being a hex code, or one of them being the actual word white. And that is part of the ASP.NET library that I'm not going to get into right now, but it's basically an enumeration of colors that we can use familiar names. I could actually type blue in here, and it's not going to be the same color blue, but it would change the color slightly to actual blue, the blue color. So I'm going to come down and look at one more property here that I'm going to change, and that being the text. I don't like that it says button. I'm going to type it. I'm going to type the word click, the words click me on there. And you'll see that now the button is a blue button with white font, and it says click me. Now it doesn't really do anything at this point. If I were to run the form in a browser and click the button, it would do a post back to the server, but it would do nothing else. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to bring another control onto my form. That's going to be a label. I'm going to put that right next to my button. I'm actually going to hit enter here so that I got them backwards. I got the label on top. I'm going to drag the label below my button. And I'm going to save that. Now I have click me, and I have the label control right next to it. I'm going to highlight label, which is going to bring my properties for the label up over here in my properties window. I'm going to leave the default ID to label 1. I'm going to come down. The only thing I'm going to change here with this control is the text property. Instead of having it be label, I'm going to type you have not clicked the button. So now when I come over here to look at the label control on my form, it says you have not clicked the button. I'm going to save that, and of course if I debug and if I run this, you're going to see those two controls on the form and nothing else in my web browser. Comes up and displays the blue button that says click me, and it says you have not clicked the button. So if I click the button, what's going to happen? Nothing. It's just going to post back what we have here, and it's going to come back, and exactly the same thing is going to be displayed once again. That just did a round trip to the server. It sent the information to the server, and the server saw that it wasn't instructed to do anything, so it just posted back exactly what was up before. So I'm going to close this out. I'm going to stop this. What I want to do is I want to change the property, the text property of this label control once the user actually does click the click me button. So I need to tell the server somehow, and the way I'm going to tell that is by some script. Now if you come over here to my Solution Explorer, you'll see that we have this default form that we've been working on, but there's also this other form. It's default ASPX.CS. Now I can double click that, and I can bring up that form where I can actually type some code in that will give instructions on what to do when I do click that button, or I could just come over here to the button itself and double click that button. What that does is it actually opens up that default ASPX.CS form, and it also wrote a little bit of code for me because it brings up the default event, which is the click event. Most of the time when we're working with a button, that's what we're going to do. We're going to click that button. So inside of the braces here, I can actually type what I want to do, what I want the server to do with my page. So I'm going to type the name of that control that we want to manipulate, which was label 1. So I'm going to type label, and you can see when I start typing it, there's stuff called IntelliSense comes up. I can hit tab because it's now highlighted on label 1. Label 1 dot, when I hit the period, it actually comes up with a list of properties and methods that we can use. I'm going to go ahead and use text because that's what we want to do. We want to change the text property of the label 1 control. So label 1 dot text equals, now I have to put this in quotations, you have now clicked the button, and end quotes, and I will put a semicolon. And I'm coding in C#, so at the end of each statement I actually have to use a semicolon. So basically what this is going to instruct the server to do, I'm going to save this, is it's going to tell it to change the text property of the label 1 control to this phrase right here. You have now clicked the button. So I'm going to go back to my default ASPX page, and you'll see that it had nothing to do with you have not clicked the button. That property is still there because this is my design time text property. The other thing is my runtime text property. When I click that button, it's going to change that text property, and you'll see how it works when I click debug here. Click debug, and it's going to launch my web browser. This time I have actually some instructions for the server once I click that button. Comes up, it says you have not clicked the button. This time when I click the button, it will do the round trip, but now it says you have now clicked the button. So that button manipulates, and I click it again, it's going to say the same thing. That button manipulates the property of that control right there by changing the text property of it. So I'm going to close the browser, and I'm going to stop debugging, and we'll look back at our design view again. You'll see that it didn't change anything here because this again is my design time text property. It's you have not clicked the button. Of course, the more complex your programs become, the more you have to think these things through, and you have to think about what kind of things you want to have happen with both design, when your user interacts with your web page. But that's the basics of it. You could see that a big part of programming with ASP.NET is actually manipulating the properties of our objects. If you have any questions, please post them below. If you have any suggestions, post them as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.